If it's a growing place, there's going to be more demand and the supply is fixed. So what happens to rents?
They go up.
And what happens to vacancy?
It goes down.
And wouldn't you want to own something like that? When I talk about different classes, we're really talking about Class A, Class B, and Class C. And Class A buildings, they're basically the nicest, newest in the market. So when he was describing warehouse and distribution centers, the Class A buildings are going to be 500,000 square feet, million square feet and up. They're going to have the really high ceilings. So like the volumetric space is a huge, huge deal. Being able to rack all the way to the ceiling, being able to utilize automation to be more efficient, all that stuff. They're going to have those really big concrete skirts around the building like he was describing so that the trucks can maneuver easily. And would that be a fairly simple way to describe Class A?
That's exactly how I describe it too.
If that's Class A, what's Class B?
There's some blurring of the lines between what Class B and Class C is. Generally, it's going to be a little bit older property. Class C might be 50 years old. Maybe Class B is 20 years old. You could have a really nice building that's 50 years old too that encroaches in that Class B space. So it gets a little bit hard to really identify. So I'd say Class B and Class C, that's kind of what you're getting on a sliding scale. Is you're going to lose some utility of lower ceiling heights. You're probably going to have a little bit lower of a marshalling or loading area in there. You might not have sprinklers. You might not have a really nice office space up front. Might be a dated property. Probably doesn't have the same efficiency from an energy standpoint. You can just imagine it being a little bit less as you start going from that B to a C. I personally love Class B and Class C. My portfolio is all in that Class B space and maybe Class C as well.
And that's why I wanted to ask you this next question. Share with us why you like Class B and Class C, but what's the thing about Class B that makes it attractive in a lot of ways?
That Class A stuff, first of all, you're competing against institutional grade money, and you're competing against like really big companies like a Prologis or a BlackRock or just really well-backed institutional funds. And a lot of that product, they can just add it at will. Like if they decide that they want to go in and add a new 1 million square foot building across the street, providing that the land's there's no geographical impediments, they can just go and add it. Whereas that Class B space, for the most part, you're going to have that in established industrial areas. And that's actually a really important thing to say about Class B and C as well, is that traditionally those are in established industrial areas. A lot of the big distribution centers have now been pushed more into the suburbs because that's where the only industrial land is. That Class B, C is servicing a lot of either the B2B or B2C inside of that city. And it's very difficult to replace that. And most people aren't. If you look at all the inventory that's been added in the majority of markets across the world, it's all been big box warehouse space. There's been very little added in terms of that Class B, Class C, even just small bays. If you can think of an average warehouse being built right now, they might be catering to 100,000 square foot tenants and up. The Class B, my portfolio, my average tenant size, if I were to really look at it, is probably like 4,000 square feet. It's very difficult to build at a price that's competitive right now with the existing inventory, that there's almost a ceiling on the inventory that can even be added, even if developers wanted to, because they'd have to charge 50% more than what I charge just to get a tenant in there and make it economical. So that the supply on that Class B, Class C has been relatively fixed for 30 years. But providing you're in a market that's seeing population growth, then you need more companies for doing electricians. You need more HVAC companies. You need more companies that just supply all the population. And that inventory has been fixed. So you're almost got a hedge on your downside risk that as long as population is growing, the inventory isn't keeping up with the demand. So you're getting into this supply-demand unequilibrium situation where it's just you're able to put upward pressure on rents and by extension, upward pressure on your values.
And that's exactly what I wanted you to say. Class B industrial in a lot of markets, especially the ones that are growing, they're not making any more of it.
Oh.
None.
The amount of it is fixed.
Oh, yeah.
Because if you're going to build something new, you're going to build the Class A stuff.
Right.
If it's a growing place, there's going to be more demand and the supply is fixed. So what happens to rents?
They go up.
And what happens to vacancy?
It goes down.
And wouldn't you want to own something like that?
Or sell it to Pawn Stars.
Yeah, maybe.
Yeah.
But that's Class B industrial is a really, really nice space. And you're often dealing with mom and pops, with especially the 4,000 or 5,000 square foot tenants. It might be their only location.
Right.
Their whole net worth is tied up into that company. They're going to make sure it works. And if it fails for some reason and they bounce, how long does it take you to find somebody else to take their space? Like a week?
Right.
You know, there's so much demand for this space. So Class B industrial in a lot of places, in a lot of markets, is just a really, really nice space in the market. And it's often overlooked because it's not as new, it's not as pretty. It's a good space.
Yeah. Never would have thought of that.
And I don't see what changes that either. Like if you start looking at potential threats to industrial real estate, I look at technology changing. I look at changes in buyer patterns, that if companies decide that they don't need as much warehouse space because they want to do more just-in-time inventory management where they're only ordering things when they need it versus, and we've kind of in this spot right now of just-in-case inventory management where companies want to have a lot of stock on hand to avoid stockouts or running out of inventory. If there's a shift back in the way companies approach this, or there's a shift back in the way that consumers want to deal with this, we could be faced with a scenario where we have way too much warehouse space. I don't see many scenarios where there's a decrease in demand for these small bay Class B spaces, because you need to have an electrician, you need to have an HVAC repair company, you need to have a small little showroom for all these different places that are selling things. And I do not see a scenario where the supply can just increase, because the cost of construction right now, the cost of buying land and then building this stuff, like I mentioned earlier, you need to charge a massive premium to justify it. And most of these companies aren't looking for a brand new space. They really just want 4 walls and a roof. They are the ones that look at this very simply, and it just becomes a numbers game to them on what their business can afford to pay in rent. So if I'm 50% of what a new space needs to charge to justify it, I'm going to keep that tenant all the time. So I don't see a scenario where we could run into a situation where demand wanes or where supply gets added dramatically and it affects that supply demand curve. I just don't see that. I've invested heavily in this investment thesis on that basis, and it sounds like, Bo, you're in full support of that as well. I just I see it as such a great spot to have money for the foreseeable future.
I totally agree.
Yeah.
Makes
Nice.
sense?
It does. It makes total sense.
Now let me ask you this, because I don't know. I've never been to Canada. Around here, in January, Kentucky is going to allow medical marijuana.
Let's go.
Yeah, I knew you would be excited about that.
If you like that, you can watch another clip right here. If you want to watch the full episode, right here.
Do it.